And at this time, we do want to bring in Florida Congressman Michael Waltz, who sits on the House Armed Services Committee, to further discuss some of these topics we've been following. Hi, Congressman. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure, my pleasure.
So getting right into it, yesterday during the Q&A portion of the impeachment trial, a Trump defense attorney, Alan Dershowitz, said that as long as the president believes his actions are in the public interest, anything he does regarding his reelection isn't impeachable. I want to play that clip for our viewers. Let's take a listen quickly.
Your election is in the public interest. And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment.
So, Congressman, Dershowitz there saying his comments are being taken out of context by his critics, who are now saying that it gives a broad privilege to presidential power. How do you interpret his comments?
Well, and I think Mr. Dershowitz has actually responded to those criticisms on Twitter, and he's clarifying that, look, if a president is doing something that is blatantly corrupt, or if there's an underlying crime, for example, President Clinton was alleged to have committed 11 felonies, that's very different than what often is a very blurry line. So, for example, if a senator does something that's good for his state, and will generate goodwill that also gets him reelected, is that political versus, in the public interest, and therefore should some kind of artificial line be drawn? And I think that's a very valid question to ask. At the end of the day, it certainly does not rise to the level of treason, bribery, or a high crime and misdemeanor. And I think that's what Mr. Dershowitz was getting at, that I fully agree with, and that this is partisan from the beginning. And the biggest evidence for me that this impeachment proceeding is partisan is that over 100 Democrats signed up for it before we even knew about this Ukraine call.
Well, and then getting to the question of witnesses, which has been a major one that we still have yet to address there in this process. The president and even some Republican senators are now leaning towards voting in favor of calling witnesses. There have been some recent reports, though, that Mitch McConnell has the votes to block this additional testimony. And then there's some recent polls that suggest that about 75% of the country supports more witnesses. Do you want to hear from somebody like John Bolton, knowing that there could be more reports of his upcoming book or additional allegations that claims the president predicted an acquittal and might affect that at all?
So I have two issues with it. One was that the witnesses should have been called and should have been subpoenaed and worked through the executive privilege issues that every president has invoked since George Washington in the House. That was the time to do it. That's the House's role. But instead, it was rushed through ostensibly because of the urgency of the matter, that the president was just such a threat to the country and national security. But yet now we have plenty of time. My issues with it are, one, I think it opens a complete Pandora's box, because we also should hear for context from Hunter Biden, from the vice president, and from others. But two, this is what is near and dear to me, is all the things that the Congress is not doing right now: immigration, health care, transportation. We can go on and on with the issues that we should be tackling. And at the end of the day, by opening it to witnesses, this thing could drag out interminably, because the courts will still have to work through all of those issues. They should have been done in the House in the first place.
Well, and then speaking of the House, there are some legislating being done as this impeachment process plays out, and I want to ask you about that. The House is going to be voting on the president's war powers regarding military actions in Iran. How do you plan to vote on that resolution today, and why?
So I actually just voted no on the first one to let you know where I stand. This is politics at its worst. Soleimani was a terrorist. He was declared by the Obama administration as a terrorist. The Quds Force that he commanded are no different than ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Baghdadi, Osama bin Laden. A terrorist is a terrorist, and the president had a duty, given the intelligence that he was going to continue that Soleimani was going to continue killing Americans. The president had a duty to take him out. So tying his hands now as Iran continues its covert maligned activity, we've deterred them from the overt, but as it continues its covert, I think is completely irresponsible, and I plan to continue to argue against it.
All right, Congressman Waltz of Florida, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube. and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.